Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Pisanik, an OpenSciEd teacher in New Jersey. Today, we are talking through Lesson 10, which is a lesson in which students are going to use a simulation to test their ideas so far. First, let's think back about how we got here. In Lesson 9, we figured out a lot about what clouds are made of, why we can see clouds, and then also what is needed in order for water vapor molecules in the air to start the condensation process. At the end of Lesson 9, we were left wondering why clouds and storms form at some times, but not at other times. So today in Lesson 10, we'll work to figure that out. Here's our lesson at a glance. Lesson 10 is a 2-day lesson. There's no hands-on investigation, but the students will use a computer simulation. So your prep work for this lesson is minimal, and it's limited to ensuring student devices are ready and you copy any handouts you need. You definitely, though, will want to try out the simulation yourself first before using it with students. Here's the snapshot for 2 days of Lesson 10. Let's look more closely at day 1. In the first chunk of the lesson, students create a gotta have it checklist of the ideas they've figured out so far that will help us answer the question, why do clouds and storms form at some times and not at others? And then they work with a simulation. So they manipulate the simulation to figure out that there's a correlation between higher humidity and greater temperature differences between the ground and the air and stronger storms. But there are limitations to our simulation. So on day 2, the students work to revisit their checklist and to revise portions of the simulation to better reflect what we know. And this experience helps students to recognize that simulations are models that can only represent parts of a system, which limits their use. So we have a consensus discussion to share our thinking about how we could incorporate more ideas into the simulation and why that would be important. Here are those big ideas again that we figure out in Lesson 10 from using and then thinking through revising the simulation. And that last move helps us realize that we still need to figure out why water droplets or ice fall at certain times, and that sets us up for the next lesson. Let's look at several of the key moments in Lesson 10. So students start on day 1 by thinking through which ideas that we've figured out so far in our investigations are really important to answer our question, why do clouds and storms form at some times but not as others? This is a key moment because we'll be coming back to this checklist and adding to it in future lessons. This is a chance for us to think through what we figured out so far that might help us answer this question. I like to co-create this with my class as a whole class activity so that we're starting from a shared list. Other modifications you might consider are giving students sentence starters to help them, or even giving them a list of the key ideas we've figured out and having them highlight or identify which ones are most helpful to answer this question. We don't want to spend tons of time sharing and debating our ideas at this point because we're going to be revisiting this. In part 3, it's time to try this out. We're going to use our checklist and see if we can use those ideas we thought were important to make a thunderstorm with this simulation. So you want to spend a few minutes showing the students the simulation, maybe even testing one scenario together if you can, before letting them go off on their own devices. There's text on the simulation, and drawing the kids' attention to that is important so that they don't just ignore it. That'll be helpful for them. This is a great partner activity. And the students have a data sheet that's available for them to use to keep track of the different combinations they use. I find it's helpful to modify that handout to make the directions a bit more clear, or to at least go through one of them with the students first before they work in partners or independently. The big idea that students are going to take from this is that the combination of higher humidity and greater difference in the high level versus low level temperature correlates with stronger storms. On day 2, the students are going to reflect on their experiences. So the first thing we do is look back at our gotta have it checklist and see, okay, the ideas that we thought were important, are they in the simulation? Are there any that are not? How well does it show those key ideas? And did it show us something that maybe we didn't have written down that we should add to our checklist? This naturally leads into a conversation about how we would revise the simulation if we could. So in this case, I found it's really helpful to make a list of ideas as the kids are coming up with it. Oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And then take those ideas and break them up by table group, sort of chunk it so it doesn't get overwhelming. We'll give each group a screenshot of the simulation that they can draw on or add to modify it to show how they could revise that simulation. And then we'll have time to have a gallery walk and a consensus discussion around what ideas they think are really valuable. A final key moment is at the end of this lesson on day 2. So we want students to reflect on what we still need to figure out, because we figured out a lot by this point. Now we know just the general conditions for a storm to form, but we don't know yet. We can't fully explain how those storm clouds get so tall, or why or how exactly hail forms. So we still have things we need to figure out. I really like to turn these end of lesson questions into an individual reflection opportunity for students. So I usually will make them into a Google form, either exit ticket, or the kids can do it for home learning if we run out of time, just to get them thinking as we move into the next lesson. There's not really any materials to manage in this lesson other than making sure that you have thought out how you want the students to use their computers for the simulation. We do not add any word wall words in this lesson, and we don't create any additional posters either. Just look back at consensus models we've already made. So I hope this video helps as you plan for lesson 10 and the simulation experience with your students. I think you'll find they really like this simulation. They enjoy making it and trying to create the biggest thunderstorm they can, and then thinking through ways to improve it. So we'll look forward to talking through the investigations of lesson 11 in our next video. See you then.